Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. The Nova boys, Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart, combined for 67 points, bury the Brooklyn Nets, ending a 9-game losing streak against the Nets. How far can they take the Knicks? We'll get into that and so much more right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And we want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day. We're now available on all platforms, and that includes on YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, you know I am joined by a fantastic guest, Josh Bass, formerly of the Locked On Nets podcast with yours truly. Now living a civilian life. I'm Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. And Josh, man, it's good to be back on with you. 2 years of shows. We used to do it on the Nets side. And now talking Knicks. And man, I could have had you on any of the last 9 times the Nets played the Knicks, but it wouldn't have been quite this sweet.
I know, man. It's good to be back, but it really is like the Twilight Zone. I remember everything I loved about doing these shows. I remember everything that drove me crazy about doing these shows. And unfortunately, it all culminates in the Nets getting thrashed. So, you know, this might be the first time we do this in a while, but also probably the last, given the results.
maybe we'll want to come back on for a Nets win just to keep it even. But for now, we got to throw up the tweet. Your hero, Nets Daily, heartbroken. I know that has to be tough to see since he's something of a mentor to you in the Nets media game. But,
I would love to be so passionate about anything as when I'm his age. So it's great.
Look, if you're tweeting in all caps about the Nets at age 85, we'll have to send someone over to you. But the story of tonight, not the heartbreak of Nets fans, as sweet as that is. It is the Nova boys, Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart. We'll start with Brunson with 40 points and 5 assists, no turnovers, 15 of 21 from the field. So this was a historic night. We'll throw it up if you're watching on YouTube, courtesy of Jonathan Macri of Knicks Film School. Per Basketball Reference, Brunson is the first Knick in the 19th player in NBA history to score 40 or more with 0 turnovers and shoot at least 70% from the field in a game. Josh, I know because you hate them. I assume you haven't watched a ton of the Knicks, haven't watched a ton of Jalen Brunson this year. What did you think of his night when initially it looked like Mikal Bridges, Nick Claxton, first 5-6 minutes were doing a pretty good job on him? Then Joe Harris comes in. Brunson starts seeking him out on switches and just kind of rolled from there.
Yeah, I mean, Brunson got going, and I think he's kind of had like a crescendo throughout the season. He's just gotten increasingly better. But I've seen a good amount of Knicks games this year. I've been to a couple, and he's just, I mean, I feel like he's gotten so good and his confidence is amazing. His handles is so tight. He's going up against bigger defenders, but a lot of these guys just kind of like to stay at home like a Dinwiddie and use their length. So for him, when he can get them a little bit off balance, he can just go right by them. And between, you know, his hezzy, just some of the head and shoulder fakes that he was doing. He had Joe Harris jumping out of his shoes a couple times. He just had a great game. And I wish the Nets were a little bit more aggressive with trapping him. But, you know, once that kind of second quarter rolled around, it was clear that he was heating up. Randle kind of, let Brunson carry more of the load. And then from the second half on, he was just unstoppable. So it was a great performance to see because I do like Brunson, even though he's a Knick.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Just having a ridiculous month. I'll throw the stats up on the screen. So these are actually his last 20 games, 30 points, 4 rebounds, 6 assists, 52% from the field, 48% from 3, 82% from the line. And to me, that's the big development for him is having the pull-up 3 in his bag last year. Was a guy who was a fantastic spot-up shooter playing off one of the best creators in basketball in Luka Doncic, but shot a pretty low percentage on self-created threes a year ago. And this year has upped the volume and has had a dramatic increase in efficiency. That is not typically how it goes, but has become pretty much unguardable now that you have to respect that shot. I mean, he's just doing dirty stuff to Joe Harris, attacking him on, back-to-back plays in the third quarter, got him with a just pretty insane shot, crossover off a shot fake, then a layup, and the next possession just Harris sat back a little bit more, put a 3 ball in his eye. He was hitting big shots at the end of quarters, hit a 3 to wrap up the first, and hit another big 3 with 11 seconds to go in the third quarter when Cam Johnson just had zero chance against him, and he's just shooting with so much confidence. Like there was one play where he saw the double team coming, and instead of just getting the ball out, like he just rose up and fired in the face of it. And these last 20 or so games, I mean, we've seen a guy who's deserving of an all-star berth. Maybe if Jalen Brown is out, he'll end up getting it. But just hitting a new level. And you combine that with the addition of Josh Hart, who for his second game as a Knick, his second straight game was fantastic, had a season high 27 points. The one concern with Hart, Josh, coming in onto this Knicks team was his 3-point shooting. Not a concern tonight. 4 for 6 from distance, 10 for 14 from the field overall. What did you think of him and how he fits with the Knicks?
Yeah, I've always liked Josh Hart. I mean, I think 4 of 6 tonight, but he is kind of a streaky guy, right? He can have these types of games, and then he'll have games where he goes 0 of 5, right, or 1 for 6. So I think he's someone that has played in a lot of big games. He feeds off the crowd, especially for him now that he's with Brunson, going up against Bridges. You could tell that he was just, I mean, I guess the last game going up against the Sixers, right? Like he's just fired up, and I think he can have, those big moments, right, and taking Deuce's minutes. He can have those and ones and really just had, that one play where he drove to his far left and had kind of an off balance shot that Day'Ron Sharpe fell on top of him and got that and one. That kind of, opened the game up. But I think he was just feeding off the crowd, especially seeing Brunson play so well. He's a great pickup for them, right? I think he's going to be a really phenomenal player. He knows his role pretty well. Obviously, you wish he was a little bit better of a shooter, but with Brunson shooting like this, I think he's another guy to feed off of. And, he could be someone that plays 30, 35 minutes a game for them in the playoffs.
Yeah. And I mean, as much as I love someone like Deuce McBride, such an upgrade over him, but also just giving you an alternative when RJ Barrett's having a really poor night. Obviously, Emmanuel quickly has filled that role to some extent this year, but Hart gives you a lot more size at that position and is just so additive in so many different ways. I mean, I phrased it last game, like his ability to correct mistakes. And you saw it again this time, like where the Nets were, I mean, they had one play where they were about to get a run out, like a Hail Mary pass. And he looked like Ed Reed, like sprinting under it, tipping it to himself. I mean, you noted the and one. He really, I think, makes Isaiah Hartenstein a much more useful player where iHeart early in the season, the Knicks were trying to use him as a facilitator and then just sort of gave him up on that. And they were like, all right, why don't you just go do a bad impersonation of Nerlens Noel and play like we want every center to play under Tibbs. But with the way Hart cuts and the way Hart runs the floor, like we haven't totally seen this yet, but I think there's going to be plenty of times where Hartenstein is kind of diming him up on these deep ball outlets. And just the combination of him and IQ, I think is also like they're kind of greater than the sum of their parts. Where Quickly has really had to carry second units of late, especially as RJ has struggled these last few games. And the just like this really simple plays for Hart. Like there was one where Brunson was doubled, he threw it to Hart, and it was just no hesitation redirecting to Quickly for the right wing 3. Super simple play, but just making IQ's life so much easier. So we can wrap up the initial segment on this, but do you feel like the Knicks, with the addition of Hart, have meaningfully changed their ceiling this year? I mean, just making the bench that much better, or do you think like whoever they run into in the first round, like whether it's Cleveland or Philly, like it's not going to make a difference against that type of team?
Yeah, I don't think he changes their ceiling a meaningful amount. He's definitely helpful, right? He's not a stopper, but he's a good team defender. He's a strong wing. But I think, it's not going to be, he's almost at the whims of how Julius Randle shoots in a series, right? Can he get hot? What happens with RJ Barrett, right? And I know we'll talk about RJ. So I don't think he's going to raise the ceiling meaningfully, but, it probably helps them considerably get out of a play-in. But I don't know if it's going to, really raise their chances of getting out of the first round.
Yeah, and I guess that was sort of my hesitancy when they gave up a first round pick for him, right? It's like, all right, do you want to do that for someone who doesn't change your playoff trajectory? But he's such a good fit so far. And I mean, he was talking about the energy in MSG, the energy that he's bringing to MSG. And he just really very clearly rounds out this team, rounds out this bench unit. And I think if they can get up to a 5 or 6 seed and get Philly's so tough with Embiid, but when Mitchell Robinson comes back, that's a little bit of a better matchup. And Cleveland, the Knicks are already 2-1 against this year. And I think that's a series against still a youngish team. They would have a chance to pull off the upset in, but to do that, they're going to need RJ Barrett to start playing better. And we'll get into that in just a sec. But before we do, I have to tell all of you about one of our favorites here at Locked On. It is FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here. And now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to points scored and threes drained. Personally, I'm looking at RJ Barrett's over-under in that Atlanta Hawks game. I mean, we've seen it all year from RJ, like a couple of bad games, and then he explodes for 30 out of nowhere. I would bet on a big night for RJ, even if it's inefficient, even if he's forcing the issue a little bit against the Hawks. So go put some money down on that. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay, so don't miss a chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets. When you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. And with that, we are back on Locked On Knicks. Josh, I've done nothing but torture you so far, making you say nice things about the Knicks. I'll let you maybe talk some trash, maybe surprise me with some optimism. RJ Barrett, really tough one for him. Mike Breen noted, and I'm sure you're watching the S broadcast, but I just kind of clinched up when I heard this. In the first half, RJ 14 minutes, had no points, no rebounds, no assists, scored a quick 4 to start the second, and then kind of went silent again. And he had been relied on to carry bench units earlier in the year and had a really nice synergy with the bench guys in particular earlier this season. That has fallen off a cliff. Like, there are times where I don't even notice that he's out there. And then with the starters, like, it feels like the Knicks are so reliant on Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle to just do incredible things. And you just sort of referenced this, but my concern is you get into a playoff series, one of those guys, or maybe even both of those guys have an off night. Who's going to step up? And at least as of late, it hasn't been RJ.
Yeah. It was a weird game from him. I mean, I think I've watched a decent amount of Knicks the last couple of weeks. I've seen some of his plight, but I mean, has a terrible matchup going up against the Nets where they have a lot of strong wings, or wings that can move their feet pretty well. And then obviously if he's getting switched onto Claxton, that's just a really bad matchup for him. But he was just kind of trying to use his strength, which just was not the right tack there. And, he has his left-handed drive, but it just wasn't getting anywhere. And he was forcing the issue. I feel for him, right? Because he kind of needs his, he's going through some growing pains now, but the Knicks are in win mode, rightfully so. And he's clearly the third option on the team with Randle and Brunson, I guess, flip that order ahead of him. And for a team that plays a lot of ISO ball, get the right matchup, and then go at you, he's just not going to get a lot of looks, especially with the starters. So I think flipping him with the bench guys would make a lot more sense, but he just seemed frustrated all night. I mean, he left the game early, at least on the Yes broadcast, they showed that. I don't know if they did on the MSG one, but was he just frustrated even though the team was winning? Like, what happened there?
Yeah, I don't know. I figured there might have been some kind of minor injury issue because they pointed out he ended the game back on the bench. So maybe it was just a cut or something, but that was a little bit strange. And I think it's kind of like upside down world for Knicks fans, where RJ's taking on some of the negative qualities you saw from Julius Randle last year, while Randle, like on the flip side, like he like threw like this bullet pass at one point to Grimes in the corner, and Grimes fumbled it. And first 20 games this year, you would have gotten like bad body language galore from Randle. That's just where you would be like, oh my God, Grimes sucks. This is miserable. And you would have known it even if you couldn't read lips. And this game is just kind of like, my bad. That's on me. And not that we're getting it to that extent from RJ, but you see the frustration from his teammates. Like, we're one game removed from Obi Toppin, like cutting and being wide open under the rim and like having like a meltdown when RJ just didn't see him for 3 seconds. And I think that's kind of my concern there, like whether there's like some like resentment being built up for a guy who generally just tries to shoot through it and like a lot of times has success. I don't necessarily think that's the case just because he's so well liked, but you're just hoping in year 4 for a little bit more consistency from him. And after he had a great stretch of games after a horrific start this year, like the RJ roller coaster, like kind of just keeps on churning. But let's go on to Randle, who again for the Knicks, like he has a very clear cut role, even as Brunson, like there was this, like Brunson was clearly the number one guy at the start of this year. Then there was a 25, 30 game stretch where Randle was clearly the number one guy. That flipped again. Brunson's, we noted the last 20 games, he's been the dude. And Randle not super efficient tonight, 7 of 17, just 1 for 6 from 3, 18 points, 10 boards, 4 assists. But I thought in key moments early in the game, like especially like he got the first 2 buckets, just making a lot of tough shots for New York.
Yeah, he kept them afloat in the first half for sure. And I think just the confidence with which he's taking these shots because he knows that he can hit them. I mean, I think his jumper over the last couple of years has waxed and waned a little bit on fluidity, but I think right now it looks really, really good. He's getting to his step back, and he's really learned how to play, I think, in this type of situation where it's just not as much bully ball. He's really just relying on his mid-ranger and his three-pointer. But he carried the Knicks, early on, and I think has just the confidence in his place on the team almost, to your point, Gavin, that he was fine letting Brunson take over in the third quarter and fourth quarter and didn't feel the need to exert as well, right? Ending up with 17 shots for him, is probably right where he is normally, but he wasn't forcing the issue at all. He's getting it in the flow of the offense, the way he kind of always does with his little ISOs and mid post ups. So I thought it was a good game from Beyblade, right? I would have liked to see a little bit more erraticism from him as a Nets fan, but he didn't force the issue.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic point because I mean, towards the end of last season, we saw a game where the Knicks got like a last second win over the Bulls, and he had a meltdown after, right? Because it wasn't him doing it. Now it's Jalen Brunson's show, and I mean, as I noted earlier, all that bad body language is gone, and I think just his basketball IQ is up in how he like kind of dictates what parts of his bag he goes to every night, because this year, like, he's mostly played kind of like Daryl Morey Rockets balls. It's been threes and a whole lot of dunks and a lot more bully ball actually than we've seen in past years. And he's kind of gone away from the mid range, especially since the earlier parts of the season. But tonight against the Nets team with so much length, right, with Nick Claxton, one of the best rim protectors in the league at the rim, he was like, all right, I got to go back to that. And for the second straight night, he was hitting from there. Like, I loved like him getting a mismatch on Dinwiddie and just kind of backing down and getting to a short mid range. Like, his pace and his patience is just at another level. And even on a night where he wasn't super efficient, that really shined through. And the same could be said, except for the lack of efficiency part for Emmanuel Quickley, who had 14 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. And again, for Quickley, like, you look at those stats and you're like, all right, I mean, you were even saying it to me pre-show when I wrote down like big night in the notes, like not really a monster night for him from a statistical perspective. But for me, it's more about contributing at key moments. Like at the start of the fourth, like the Nets were still very much in this game, and it was Quickley and Hart kind of putting them away before Brunson came in and sort of set off the fireworks. But back-to-back plays to start the fourth where he beat his man, got a lob to a cutting Obi Toppin, that man Obi Toppin needed so desperately, because he's been really struggling the last few games. And then got middle again, just blowing right by Spencer Dinwiddie and drawing a foul. And I think you're seeing a guy who went from kind of not knowing what he was supposed to do earlier in the year, who has some real point guard attributes now in terms of knowing like when to go, when to get his own shot, when to set up a teammate, and just always seems to be dribbling the ball with a very direct purpose.
Yeah, no, I think that was, one of the biggest things I noticed is that, Quickley has insane range, right? He can get really streaky from three, but he wasn't taking as many tonight, right? He definitely had a couple times where it was maybe 6 or 7 seconds left in the shot clock. He got one that was kind of in rhythm. He could have taken it, but again, he probed, found the better shot, kept moving the ball a little bit. And I think that's his maturation of a player. And when you combine that with someone that does have his innate scoring ability, his peskiness on defense, you do have the makings of probably someone that could be a low-end starter, but right now a really high-quality backup for Brunson. And for this Knicks team that you mentioned, Gavin, that has, the second unit that, with Toppin, who's probably not being used right, Hartenstein, who maybe needs a little bit more confidence. You have Hart coming in, who's stabilizing the ship. Between Quickley and Hart, that's a really good kind of perimeter duo to have off the bench.
Yeah, I just think they so clearly make each other better. And I mean, as much as Hart and Brunson are best friends, I think Hart and Quickley are going to be best friends before the year is done. Real quick, let's just go. Yeah,
consensus for that Hart's going to not take his player option.
Yeah, I think he's going to, especially, I mean, if he plays like this, but I think he wants more money. But I guess the good news for the Knicks is him being a CAA guy. They probably have like the best possible intel on him wanting to stay in New York and knowing that. when giving up the first round pick. So I think they will figure that out. Maybe the Knicks, they'll have to give up some draft capital to move off of Evan Fournier to get that done. But that's a concern for another day. I wanted to shout out another really solid game for Isaiah Hartenstein before we wrap up this part of the podcast. 8 points, 5 rebounds. Somehow it didn't feel like this, but somehow a team high plus 29. That might have been saying just as much about Jericho Sims, who played the same amount of minutes, but was a minus 11. But that's continued a trend over the last 2-3 weeks where Hartenstein has been the better of the two. And he committed a couple of reckless fouls, but I thought found some really good ways to contribute on the glass, a couple of tip-ins. And as I noted before, I mean, when Brunson is going nuclear and you have another really good passer and cutter in Hart, I think you see more dimensions of his game opening up. And in turn, like everyone, like when he's touching the ball, when he's finishing a little bit more, playing with more effort, more energy on both ends.
Yeah, I like Hartenstein. I don't know. I think it might be because I went to the Sixers game a week or two ago, and he probably got the wrong end of like 15 calls from the refs that were just giving Embiid everything. And just the look on his face was just someone who I don't think I've ever seen an NBA player so sad, except maybe Dinwiddie after he doesn't get a call, but that's just more anger. But I like what Hartenstein can do. Right, he's a big body. He plays within himself, and he's doing the little things, and also he makes some nice passes. I think he caught a body at some point on someone in the fourth quarter. When I was a little bit out of the game, just given how my Nets were doing. But I think overall, right, he's a good backup center to have. Does a nice job with the second unit. But, is he ever going to be someone that you want to play more than 20 minutes a game? No, but that's why you have Mitchell Robinson when he comes back from injury.
Yeah, we are super duper excited for that. You could almost say the Knicks are hiring Mitchell Robinson or rehiring Mitchell Robinson. If you want to hire someone, there's only one place to go. As a small business owner or hiring manager, that success in 2023 all depends on the team members you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. Josh, I'm going to throw this to you because I know you're something of a LinkedIn king. How do you use LinkedIn? How has LinkedIn been good in your life?
LinkedIn. I mean, listen, I use it a decent amount. I think I just like to troll my friends whenever they have like a random work anniversary that pops up that they don't realize. But it's great to see what other people have going on, right? People that you knew from middle school or way back when, just say, keeping tabs on people that way. So always a big LinkedIn user. I have a lot of friends that have gotten jobs through that. So definitely a phenomenal tool.
Yeah, and some of those friends, I mean, end up being people you can eventually hire. I mean, that's how I've always used it, and reconnecting with people, and in turn, like it is probably my top resource for finding new work. And there are a number of reasons that is true. You can quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools. And they have 875 million member profiles. So you're going to get the best applicants inevitably out of the biggest pool. And you can identify quality candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect with them fast and for free. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right. It is the time everyone was waiting for. We are going to talk some Brooklyn Nets, maybe a little schadenfreude, but also a real conversation, because I will say it when hopefully most people have stopped listening at this point. I loved those Nets teams, Josh, when we covered them together. Dinwiddie, the hyperactive hyphen, of course. Joe Harris bombing threes. Jared Allen in his youthy dropping throwdowns on a regular basis. They were just a lot of fun, and they were greater than the sum of their parts. And my initial instinct on these Nets is even if they haven't quite found that cohesion yet, they're eventually going to get there. Like you and I were texting early in the game, like how incredible their potential is defensively with Bridges, with Dorian Finney-Smith, with Royce O'Neal, with Ben Simmons, if he ever gets it together. Nick Claxton, of course, a potential all defense type guy. But what do you make 3 games or so into this new era of Nets basketball?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of just a long learning curve here. When Jacques Vaughn took the kind of interim mantle, right? He was coaching a few superstars, right? That 2 became 1 and then 0 in very quick succession. And we've seen how he did on rebuilding teams when he was with Orlando. This isn't really a rebuilding team. It's kind of more of a retooling team. But I think he has a lot of, new faces in the rotation. He obviously, even with the incumbent guys, still has the Ben Simmons conundrum and what to do there. And then also figuring out how to slot in Joe Harris, who, still it's a little bit, there's still some trepidation there after the whole, injury last season and him being the GOAT of the Milwaukee series 2 years ago. So I think this team has some potential on the margins. I think the one thing that they're really missing, and we saw this tonight, is that they need kind of a steady the ship point guard. Even like a Monte Morris type in Dinwiddie's spot would probably be a lot better, because you need someone that can score but also wants to distribute. And Dinwiddie, we've known this, when on his first stint with the Nets, is really a score first guy that wants to get his and can get really hot and be, he's not a bad passer. He just doesn't really do it as much as I'd probably want him to. And can let just kind of how his relationship with the refs is going affect the rest of the game and just the team morale. So I think they can get there. They're just really missing that type of guy. I mean, their other guards, Seth Curry, who's injured, isn't that guy. Cam Thomas is probably someone who looks to score way more than even Dinwiddie. So there's going to be some struggles here. I think my big thing is Claxton is taking a huge leap forward. But you really need a point guard that can continue to get him the ball and find him for lobs and right inside when he's, when the attention's being drawn to the shooters. And Dinwiddie's just not that guy. He's an absolutely terrible alley-oop thrower, even though he did throw a good one tonight, which Claxton botched. So, overall, I think this probably is the makings of a team that will drop into the 7 or 8 seed, but I would be surprised if they fully, fell out of the play and, sub 10. So I think they'll be in the mix and maybe even a potential matchup with the Knicks in the play-in series, which would be very fun.
That would be a blast. Maybe they just need to bring back like a Chris Chiozza type to steady the ship.
Love that. Listen, or the natural, Mike James.
Wow. Yeah. You're Euroball legend, Mike James. So I threw this your way while we were watching the game, but do you think there's a world where, and I understand why Nets fans will kind of be groaning at hearing this, but where they make maybe not an all-in move, but some kind of star trade, because they do have all these assets now. And of course, like, they can't really tank because they don't have their own picks, or at least not every year. They don't have their own picks, and the Rockets have swap rights with them in the years where the Rockets don't have their pick. And they have all these assets, and they have a team that is like weirdly, like, obviously not ready-made to contend in the sense that they don't have a star. But if you plug a star in here without giving significant talent back, like, you have sort of like the perfect supporting cast. Like, and honestly, it kind of reminds me of what the Suns have had the last few years, for the very obvious reason that you have two of their key pieces, but also like Claxton is, I mean, honestly, maybe even a better player than DeAndre Ayton at this point in some ways. And you just have like this insane amount of 3 and D wing depth. You have like a spark plug 6-man, maybe in the best case scenario for him in Spencer Dinwiddie. And even if you have to move a few guys in a deal, like, again, like someone like Yuta, who's out of the rotation now, turned himself into a really good player this year. Like, there was a reason. I mean, what was the stretch for the Nets? They were like 17-2. There was a reason. Like, they were arguably the best team in the NBA with a healthy Kevin Durant, with a healthy Kyrie Irving. Like, do you think there's any desire to say, like, all right, we have all these extra first round picks, like, let's go turn them into something? Or is it more so, let's do this kind of low and slow and I guess kind of complete what the ideal was when Sean Marks first took over?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to rush back in anything. I think, remember, it's not extra first round picks. It's almost the normal allotment, but just not with the Nets is, right? It's instead with Phoenix's. So I think the problem is, one, you're putting all the eggs into a basket, and that basket is not going to be as good as Kevin Durant's, right? So regardless of whoever they get, it's just not going to be KD at the level that he's played in a Brooklyn uniform. So, they couldn't win the championship with that team. Obviously, there was a lot of, outside factors there, injuries, everything that happened with Kyrie Irving, KD's.
Wait, some stuff happened with Kyrie?
Yeah, just one or two minor things, if you haven't been following. But so I just don't think there's, especially this season or this offseason, any interest in getting back to that. So I think let's see how things go. They obviously have a couple young guys that I think they want to see how it plays out, right? Claxton obviously is established. Cam Thomas is probably the biggest X factor there. You have guys like, I'm surprised they didn't flip any of their wings, actually. So when you look at the rest of this team, there is a makings of a good, like, 3 through 10 from a depth standpoint. But, I'd be shocked if all these guys are on the roster next season. I think they're going to look to flip a couple of these folks for picks.
All right. And I guess we'll wrap on this, but what element of this team has you most optimistic right now and like most excited to watch both the rest of the season and going beyond that?
I think the defense is really exciting. I mean, Brunson got going basically as soon as the first few subs were made, but when Bridges was on him in those first 5 or 6 minutes and Claxton was getting switched on to him, I was actually getting really pumped up because the Nets were swarming everywhere. Dinwiddie, I think reputation as a defender is probably a little bit better than he actually is, but it's fun, especially after watching, Harden for not as many games as I would have liked, Kyrie, some of these other guys, to actually just see a team that's going to try on defense, has a bunch of grinders. Bridges and Johnson have a great chemistry together. So I'm really excited for that. And then Claxton's like my favorite player that we've had in a while. So very excited just to see how this team coalesces. I'm probably going to be pulling my hair out a lot more than I was when we still had KD. But I think it'll be a fun ride, and also to see how Jacques Vaughn does as a coach with a team that's not as ready made as it was pre-deadline.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he did a great job taking over for Steve Nash this year, and again, I'm not trying to rub salt in the wound, but I was like at points watching them with my roommate, as you both know, is a big Nets fan. Like I was like, wow, they're incredible, and there's still something there in terms of a fun team. Before I let you go, I know you pretty well, so I know you don't really have anything to promote, but I don't know. You want to talk about your roommate's like rug factory? You want to talk about your friend Rob's charity? Anything you want to shout out on the sacred Locked On Airways?
That's a good one. Equal Education Fund. My friend Rob Goldberg does great work there, so give them a follow on Instagram. I believe it is at Equal Education Fund, but they do really awesome work for local high school students in the DC area. So that's a good reminder, Gav. You're getting kind of a partial plug on that one.
Yeah, wow, he's gonna be elated. Might get me a late wedding invite there. But and until next time, he's my good friend Josh Bass. I'm Gavin Schall. This was Locked On Knicks. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll have you covered on a pod tomorrow. Maybe making some bold predictions for the second half of the season, and then we'll have you covered the Hawks game before the All-Star break. But until then, be good. We'll talk to you soon on Locked On Knicks.